So the story is that the Syrian Greeks, like about 200 years before Yeshua, had taken over the Middle East. This all started with Alexander the Great, and when he died, conquered the whole world in 3 years, and when he died, his kingdom divided up into four guys. And one of those guys, the Seleucids, they took over Syria, and that one just blew up. It exploded. And it took over everything and everybody. And their whole big thing was, we're going to kill you with a smile. You can do anything you want. You can do your religion. You can do whatever you want, but not the Jewish stuff. Yeah. You can do the Jewish religion. That's okay. Just don't do the Jewish stuff. But you can do your religion. That's fine. As long as you don't do that Jewish stuff. And they enforced this to death. So they got stronger and stronger and stronger. It was very, very bad. And it took about 70 years. And what happened was this guy named Antiochus, and he called himself Epiphanes. You know what Epiphanes means?
God with us?
God incarnate. God, no, not God with us. That's Emmanuel.
God in the flesh.
God in flesh. He called himself God in flesh. Antiochus Epiphanes. And he went into Israel, and this is in the Bible, by the way, in Daniel. He went into Israel, and he started enforcing no circumcision, no Torah reading, no festivals, no new moon, especially you can't eat kosher. If you eat kosher, you're done for. You have to not eat kosher. And if you do eat kosher, you're done. They take your children, they kill your children in front of you. Yay, it's a party. They kill your children in front of you. They take everything you own, they kick you out on the street, and you're done. Especially if you eat kosher. So this went on for a couple decades, several decades. And it got worse and worse and worse. And then in 186 BCE, 186 years before Yeshua, a war broke out between the Syrian Greeks and one family of Jewish priests. One family. There were 7 boys and then a few of their friends, and they were going up up against the mightiest military force on the planet at that time. Now, they only had about 3,000 people in this force at the beginning, the Syrians, and there were, I don't know, a few dozen Jews, and the Jews won. And the Syrian Greeks of Antiochus said, What? Get in there and kill these people. Kill these Jews. And so now they're gathering some more Jews. Now there's about 1,000 Jews. And there's about 10,000 forces against 1,000 Jews. And they went to battle, and the Jews won. And Antiochus is saying, will you please get in there and kill these Jews? And so one of the generals, there's a gate in the temple named after him, named Nicanor. He went up with 35,000 forces, went up against this little bunch of Jews that wouldn't fight on Shabbat. At this point, there's about 5,000 of them. And the Jews beat them. 35,000 forces, they beat them. This happened about 4 more times, and they could not beat the Jews. They just couldn't beat them. And the reason was this one verse in Zechariah. Becca, can you do me a favor? It's in the back of this book. Can you find the prayers for Hanukkah? There's this one verse that we've been reading lately in Zechariah chapter 9 that said, where God says that he will raise up a war between Judah, the Jews, and your sons, O Greece. Yavan in Hebrew. Your sons, O Greece. And this is a war that God was creating and making to happen. Zechariah chapter 9. He says, for I will bend Judah as my bow, and fill the bow with Ephraim, and I, God, will stir up your sons, O Zion, that's the Jews, against your sons, O Greece. I will stir up your sons, O Zion, against your sons, O Greece. And I'll make you like a warrior's sword. This is a war that God is making happen. And that's why the Greeks couldn't beat them. They couldn't beat the Jews. It was impossible. The Jews wouldn't even fight on Shabbat, and they still beat the Greeks. So they made a decision. They got corporately, they came together because they were losing some Jewish people. And so they came together, and they thought about it, and they prayed about it, and they talked about it, and they said, we're going to fight on Shabbat. And a bunch of the Jewish people were like, no, you can't do that. You can't fight on Shabbat. They said, yeah, but God is making this war. So let's make war. Let's do what God wants on Shabbat. And they did, and they won, and they won, and they won, and they won. The Greeks could not beat them. So it took 3 years. They went to war for it was actually 3.5 years, almost exactly to the day, that the Jews finally took back the temple, and they went into it. They went into the temple, and they cleansed it. They cleaned it, because Antiochus had gotten the worst possible thing that he could possibly do. He did. Guess what it was?
Pig market. Slaughtered a pig.
Turned the Jewish priests into Hellenizers. So that the Jewish priests, the ones who were like in charge of the whole thing, like in charge of Judaism spreading and teaching and making Judaism spread, he got them to be the teachers of Hellenism. And to preach to the rest of the Jews, just calm down. Let's just have a party. It's all right. Just relax. You don't have to keep kosher. It's all right. We can still do our religion. You don't have to keep kosher. You don't have to keep the festivals. You don't have to do the new moon. It's all right. Just relax and have fun and have a party and eat and enjoy. Come into the temple and we'll have a good time. That was the worst thing he could have possibly done, and he did it. He turned all the leaders of Israel, the priests, against Judaism, and they preached to the rest of Israel to turn against Judaism. And then, he did. He slaughtered a pig on the altar. He slaughtered a pig on the altar, and they got the broth, and they made the priests drink it. That was the day that he started, turning them against Judaism. So then he got an idol of himself, the face of himself, and he put it up on the altar. And you don't have to believe me about this. We've talked about it before. You don't have to believe me. You can do the research yourself. But the face of Antiochus Epiphanes was the face of, quote, Jesus Christ. And this is 183 years before Yeshua. You need to do that research yourself. Don't believe me. And it's very easily verifiable. All you have to do is look at all the images that Antiochus made of himself, and that's the same image that he put on the altar. So, they got the altar, they cleansed it, they fixed everything up, they remade the menorah, and you know how it says in Exodus and Leviticus that you have to get olive oils and press it and get the oil from the first pressing to make the oil for the menorah. The menorah is about 6 feet tall, and they be up on a like a little stool, like steps, like 2 steps to go put the oil in. You laughing? Yeah, like you would have to do it. You'd have to do that. Get up on those steps. Put that oil on.
It'd probably be 3 steps.
Yeah, you'd be 3 steps. 4. 4. And they remade enough oil just for one flask, which is about this big, about the size of a fist is the amount of oil. It's a very, very hard process. But that was enough for one day. And they put it in the menorah, and then they said, okay, let's just see what happens. They lit the menorah, and it kept going. It kept going. And each day they would say, it's still going. Why is it still going? Because we have to make more. It's a long, hard process, and they had to make more oil. Enough for months. And so they kept making oil, storing it, and it kept burning for 8 days. That's why Hanukkah's 8 days.
It should have only lasted
Should have just lasted one day, right? But God kept it going so that they could get more oil, because he wanted that picture where everybody could see that light from God of Judaism is in the temple, and nothing can put it out. Nothing can put it out unless God puts it out.
Yeah.
So, there were 3 areas or regions where Hellenism came out of. So when you say Greece, just think of like Greece, this big giant thing. No, there were 3 areas or regions. One was Macedon, up north. That's where, what's his name?
Alexander.
Thank you. Alexander came from. Did you find it, by the way? Thank you. That's where Alexander came from, Alexander of Macedon, Alexander the Great. He came from Macedonia, up north, and you come down a little bit, and you come to Sparta. Sparta was a huge region. It wasn't just a city, it's a city-state.
Yeah, to the kick.
It's a city-state, and it's Sparta. And that's, I know what you say. And that's where, you know about the Spartans and the 300 and all that, which, by the way, is mythology. It's not real.
What?
Yeah, that didn't happen.
Really?
Yeah, absolutely
It's a
untrue.
great movie, though.
Great movie, but
Yeah.
it didn't happen. Didn't happen like that. And then lower down is Athens, which is not just a city. It's
It's a city-state as well.
I asked the Vita today, I said, what happened in Athens? She goes, I don't know. I said, picture it, like, what's in Athens? I don't know. So maybe nobody knows.
Isn't that the Parthenon?
Yes, where the Parthenon is and all those
That's a
column
city-state
buildings where all the
as well.
gods were kept.
Yeah.
So, 3 different regions had 3 different main pushes of Hellenism. The top one, Macedon, that's where Philip of Macedon and his son Alexander came from. They were all about one thing and one thing only: power and control. That's why they conquered the whole world in 3 years. The whole world. It was just all about control. Go out, beat everybody, and control. Lower down was Sparta. What do you think they were all about?
Kicking people.
Wars and fighting.
Kicking people. War and fighting? No. You've seen the movie. How did they fight?
I do.
They were barbaric.
They were naked. So that's where the marathon was in the era of Sparta, and the Olympics, and there was lots of games and sports and the body. They worshiped the body. So this is where the whole push for the beautiful, perfect body and sports and exalting the body. Is that you? Is that what you?
Something to the word gymnasium or gym?
Yes, that's exactly where the word gymnasium comes
That's the
from.
word to make it.
That's correct. That's exactly right. If you go to the gymnasium in Israel, you would go naked. Because Hellenism spread throughout all of Israel. I'm going to get back to that. So, that was from Sparta, the middle area. And then lower down, Athens. So what do you think came out of Athens?
All that
Art.
Greek mythology.
Philosophy.
Yes.
Science?
Some art, some mythology, but the big thing was philosophy. The worship of the brain. Where it's like, we got our own religion, we don't need a God. We can just think things out and think and make up our own religions and think about everything. Everything about the brain and intelligence and what's called in the Bible man's or earthly wisdom. It's called in Greek sophistry. Sophistry.
Where
It's
the name Sophia comes from.
where the word Sophia comes from.
Sophia.
Sophistry. It's like thoughts, the brain. We're so smart. These were the three main pushes of Hellenism. I'll tell you why. Because when God created man, he created man, and then he created the Mishkan, and they're both the same. The Mishkan is the tabernacle. And when he created the tabernacle, it's like a little model of a human being. But the human being is a little model of the Mishkan, the tabernacle. Where does God live?
In the heart.
In heaven, in the Mishkan.
Oh.
And remember, he put the Mishkan on earth, and he said, make this exactly like you see it. Because it's a model of what is in heaven. It says it in Hebrews chapter 8 and Acts chapter 7. It says, make this exactly as you see it, because it's a model of what's in heaven. But where does God live? He lives in the Mishkan. So the human body is set up the same way. I'll tell you how. We have three ways that we serve God. In the moach, that's the mind. In the lev, the heart, actually here. The lev, the heart. And then in the liver, which is called the kaved, which is the same word for honor or respect.
The Hokmah
Kaved.
and mind.
I'm sorry, what?
Hokmah.
What about chokhmah?
Hokmah and the mind, therefore wisdom, and it's all related to the mind.
I'm
You said Moach for the mind, right?
moach, yes.
So Hokmah,
Are they related?
I think that's the reverse.
It might be. I don't know. You might be right. I have no clue.
Yeah.
Check
What
it.
about the kishkis?
Well, when you say heart in Hebrew, there's three different words for heart. There's one that means the womb, one that means just an empty place, orea, and one that is lev, which means the heart. But they all encompass the intestines, the stomach, the bowels. So kishkis are that, the lev, the gut. But the liver is where the seat of emotions are. People tell you the seat of emotions is in your stomach. It's not. It's in your liver. What's created in the liver?
Blood?
It's a filter.
Blood?
Blood.
No, blood's made in the bone.
Blood's made in the bones, and then it goes where?
Gets filtered in the
Yes, it gets it gets cleaned and filtered and created the way it is in the liver. That's what it's for. Well, it says in the scriptures that the life of the flesh,
It's in the blood.
the life of the flesh, like that's something you're not supposed to like in the New Testament. You're living in the flesh, you're talking in the flesh. The life of the flesh is where?
In the
In the
blood.
blood. That's the liver. So the three places where we worship God are the moach, the mind, the lev, the heart, and then the liver, the kaved. So you have a spirit. Well, I'll work backwards. You have a nefesh, a soul. That's the liver. It's like the earthly, your emotions, your, how you think, how you feel, your sense of humor, just who you are, your personality and all that jazz. That's the liver. The life of the flesh is in the blood. The liver. And then the heart is not, it's ruach, it's spirit, but ruach is not the highest spirit. Did you know that? The word ruach is not the highest word for spirit. There's one that's much higher. What is it?
Neshama?
Yes, neshama. Neshama also means spirit, but that's the brain, the mind. So think about this. If you can get a hold of people's brain and make them worship their brain, you have now completely cut off their ability to worship God in Judaism with their mind. To figure things out, to use your brain to figure things out.
To ask questions.
So that to ask questions and to, like what Daniel's constantly doing, like playing with the words in the Hebrew and stuff like that, which I'm not smart enough to do. But he does it like he's eating pancakes. I don't know how he does it. But that's using the brain to worship God. That's what we're supposed to be doing. Everything is not a brain puzzle. Because you also have the heart. which is more important, the Ruach. The Ruach is more important than the Nefesh, the soul. But if you can get people's brain, like get people to worship their brain, they can no longer use Judaism to worship God with. It's over. It's impossible. Because everything becomes a brain. You ever see the show House?
Yeah.
You know remember that show House?
Yeah.
That guy was so brilliant, but he was such a cruel jerk to everybody. Because everything was a brain puzzle. Everything was something to figure out. Got to figure it out. Got to figure it out. Got to figure it out. Instead
That's
of
not true.
instead of feeling God's compassion for people, which is not in the kidneys, the liver. That's in the heart.
It's like
That's the
movie The
spirit.
Chosen.
Like the movie The Chosen. Yeah, we just saw part of it this morning. I'll tell you about it. In the movie The Chosen, if you haven't seen it, you should see it. There's a kid, Jewish kid, Hasidic kid, and he's brilliant. He's called an Ilui, and Ilui means a genius. But it's a particular kind of genius. It's genius with Torah, where you can just, like you remember where everything is.
Like the guy you talked about.
Like the guy I talked about yesterday, and he just quoted 1,000 verses like that without even thinking. That's an Ilui. And this kid is an Ilui. And so his father, who's the Hasidic Rabbi, stops talking to him when he's about middle school age. He just stops talking to him completely. Doesn't even say hello to him, to his own son. And he says, because I needed to build in my son, I saw that he was just a walking brain. And he had no heart for other people. He couldn't feel other people's pain. So, through the silence that we had, I taught him to feel other people's pain by cutting him off. I stopped talking to him. And so in the pain and the loneliness of that silence, he learned to feel other people's pain.
Is that what carrot's about, kind of?
Is that what what's
Carrot?
about?
To cut off?
Oh, keret.
Yeah, carrot.
Yeah, keret.
Carrot, okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess
I
so.
think so, huh?
I guess
I
so.
can see how that would
To
work.
push somebody away to be lonely, yeah.
Yeah.
That's the heart,
Interesting.
spirit, ruach. But then down in the liver is the soul. And so, because there's 3 places that we worship God, Hellenism had 3 places that they stole those 3 things. And it still is going on today. I'm going to prove it to you that this didn't stop in the New Testament. There's 2 passages in Mark. I don't have my notes, so I can't remember where they are. But there's 2 passages in Mark. Can we open a window? That say that the Hellenists, the Herodians is the way it says it. The Herodians. Do you know what a Herodian is?
Nope.
A Hellenist. Remember I told you that Edom is Rome and Herod. The Herods, like the Caesars, sort of, like a smaller version. The Herodians are the ones who were Hellenized Jews, because Hellenism spread throughout Israel, and it was even worse than in Greece. Hellenism didn't spread to the world through Greece. After Antiochus, Hellenism spread to the world through Israel. Did you know that in Jerusalem, right by the temple, you know what there was? There was, what's that long hippodrome? You know, where in the movie Ben-Hur, where they're going around in a circle and doing the chariot races? There was one right by the temple. And they would do the sports there naked. Right by the temple. In Jerusalem. In the 1st century, when Yeshua was alive. It spread from Israel. So in these 2 verses, it says that the Herodians sent people to argue and try to entrap Yeshua so they could kill him. The Herodians. Everybody gets mad at the Pharisees. Oh, the Pharisees, they hated Yeshua. Yeshua was a Pharisee. Yeshua was a Pharisee. In Israel, you were either a Pharisee or a Sadducee. There is no in-between. Well, I guess the in-between would be a Hellenist. Would be a Hellenist, which is an in-between. The Sadducees were Hellenized, the Pharisees were not. And they were at war for over 100 years. Listen to this. On one day, the Sadducees crucified 1,000 Pharisees. Wow. On one day. About 100 years before Yeshua. So this war between the Hellenism with the Sadducees and the Pharisees went on for over 100 years. And it was bad. On one day, there was one day in particular where they went to war, 22,000 Jews were killed. Between Pharisees and Sadducees. Nobody ever tell you that? No. That they were fighting in the streets, killing each other? Why? Because the Sadducees were Hellenized, and the Pharisees were not. So this whole war that said, I'm going to raise up, Israel, you sons of Zion against the sons of Greece, this started 100, almost 200 years before Yeshua, and it has never stopped. And I know it's never stopped because 2 verses in Acts say that the Hellenists, and it uses the word Hellenists, were arguing and seeking to kill, guess who? Who is the most un-Hellenized guy in the New Testament?
Shaul.
Paul. Shaul. Yeah. Shaul. The most Jewish guy in the New Testament. The Hellenists were arguing with him. It says that he was arguing with them, and they sought to kill him. 2 verses in the New Testament. This war that God stirred up, it's never stopped. It's never stopped. And it's if you can make it real simple in your brain, just think about oil and water. Just think about oil and water. No matter what you try, you can't mix them. So, you can try to mix Judaism with Hellenism, but it won't work. What do we eat at Hanukkah?
Oil.
Latkes.
Oil
Anything
stuff.
with oil.
Everything fried in oil. To remember the oil. And I'm telling you that, you don't have to believe me, but I'm telling you, after 41 years of being a believer, that the one fight that just drives everybody nuts. You know how there's always a bottom line to everything? Everything. If you can search, you can find the bottom line for why these 2 people are fighting or whatever. Sure. The bottom line to every single argument among believers is always the same thing. It's always the same thing. It's always Judaism against whatever. And that whatever is always the same thing. Hellenism. So, even though Leviticus chapter 23 doesn't say do Hanukkah as one of the Moedim, the longest prophecy in the whole Bible, do you know where it is?
Daniel.
Daniel what?
12?
10
Nope.
and 11?
Very good.
Or
10, 11.
12.
That's exactly right. 10, 11.
10,
Right.
11.
Together. Very good, Joe. The longest prophecy in the whole Bible is in Daniel 10, 11. Guess what it's about?
Hanukkah.
It's about Hanukkah. It gives you the whole history of all the Antiochuses down to Antiochus Epiphanes, and then it talks about the Maccabees, and guess how it describes the Maccabees? Those who know their God. Doesn't say that about anybody else in the whole Bible, that this person knows God. And that's why they're doing what they're doing. Doesn't say that about anybody else that I can think of. Can you think of somebody where God says, like an angel comes and says, this person knows their God? Can you think of anybody? This person knows their God.
David.
Where does it say that?
and says he's after God's own heart?
I didn't say that. I said,
Different.
where does it say?
It's not the
And
same.
it says, this person knows their God.
I mean, even Moshe's song, Face to Face, it doesn't say that about him.
It doesn't.
It says he was his friend.
That's right.
It's different.
It says that about Abraham too.
Right.
But I can't think of a verse, and maybe I'm wrong, but I can't think of one, that says, where God says, these people or this person knows their God.
Enoch?
Says it. Say it again.
Enoch?
Enoch? No. It says he knew God, and then God took him. Well, it says that about a lot of people. This person knew God. But I'm talking about where God says, this person knows God. It doesn't say that about Enoch. It says it like you're saying about a lot of people. So, think about this. The Maccabees knew their God. And what were they fighting for? Judaism. And they were fighting to destroy Hellenism.
You know, the only scripture that I can think of is boast in one thing, that you know God.
Mm-hmm.
But it doesn't say anybody else does, but it's
Right.
saying that's what you should strive for.
That's what you should brag about.
Yeah, brag about.
Yeah.
Don't brag about your riches. Don't let the rich man brag about his riches. Don't let the strong man brag about his strength, like an Hellenizer. Don't let I can't remember what the other one is. But if you're going to brag, but when you brag about this, that you know and understand me. You're supposed to. Brag about it. So, that's what we're celebrating. I know it's like a real bummer of a story.
Gee.
You know, it is. It's awful. But it's one of the deepest times of the whole year. Because it really and think about when it comes. Right before the most Hellenized day of the whole year.
True.
Christmas.
Sometimes right on top of it.
Right,
Yeah.
sometimes right at the same time.
Within a
The
few
most
days.
Hellenized day of the entire year. Oh, can you feel it? Can you feel that fight? It's always about Judaism against Hellenism, always. And I don't think that it's a coincidence that the most Hellenized day of the whole year, Hasatan, the devil, chose to make it right at Hanukkah, which is the day that you fight Hellenism. And yet, who's fighting the Hellenism of Christmas?
Kind of like abortion, because it's like he wanted to attack the conception of Yeshua indirectly or figuratively in this case. Makes perfect sense.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeshua conceiving.
Abort the baby before he comes.
Yeah.
So I know this is kind of deep, but it's very, very important that you understand that what you're in, you know, no matter where you're at, if you're born again, what you're in is a Jewish thing. And those aren't just words. People died for that. And this is the day we celebrate that. They died for it, to fight Hellenism. So, you know, wherever you're at, try to make little strides toward understanding that. Okay? Mm-hmm. All right.
Question.
Yes.
Yeshua knew God.
Yeah, one would hope.
Anyways,
You think?
But does it say that?
he said,
Does it say
you've seen
he-
me, you've seen God.
Does it say he knew God?
Okay.
Does
Anyways,
it?
That's it. But the other question
What?
is,
Wait. Does it say he
No.
knew? Okay, that's all my
but
point
he
was.
was, anyway,
That's all my point.
Hanukkah, people, the New Testament teaches he was in, they of course Hellenized the name, that he was in the temple during the winter feast, that's what they called it.
Summer festival.
So why do you think he taught what he taught that day?
Guys know what he taught at Hanukkah? Do you know what he said? Do you know what they did at Hanukkah in the temple
No.
with Yeshua?
No.
Picked up stones to kill him.
Oh, that's right.
Remember? Well, I'm not going to tell you what he said. You go read it for yourself. It's in John chapter 8. Sorry, John chapter 10. In John chapter 10, go look at what he said. Go look at what he said. He was directly attacking Hellenism. And they went, you ain't gonna talk about my Hellenism in my temple of Jerusalem. So I'm sure that Yeshua was very, very, very angry about all the Hellenism that was there.